Judaism is a Jewish religion. It is the foundation of the other Abrahamic religions, namely Christianity and Islam. They form a triangle with three sections: Judaism at the base with Christianity in the middle and Islam at the top. The Tanakh is the basis of the theology of these three religions. Judaism is the world's oldest monotheistic religion, dating back nearly 3,000 years. Followers of Judaism, Moshites, are monotheistic. They believe in one God who revealed himself through ancient prophets. The first introduction of monotheism to the world was the Kemetic king Akhenaten, who reigns during the period 1351 to 1334 BC. However, the Kemites rejected it after his death and reverted to polytheism, wherein everyone was free to acknowledge their god or gods. This was a natural form of spirituality. The God of Judaism is Yahweh, in English as Jehovah. This God came into prominence after one of the prophets in Judaism, Moses, claimed to have had an encounter with this God in the desert. Before this, the existing world did not know Yahweh or Jehovah. The existence of this God could be traced to no more than 2,700 years if it happened at all. There was a god in Kemet known as Yah or Jah that was recognized as the moon god. Yah was recognized and throughout the Levant. The moon god of Kemet was rendered as Ah or Yah. Ah was the Egyptian god of the moon and time. He was represented as a young god and the student of Thoth. He is therefore regarded as a patron of pupils and students. He was also revered as a god of fertility. Ah was in charge of the lunar year, 12 to 13 months of 28 days each. The ancient Egyptians used the sun, moon, the planets, and the stars as a reference for measuring the passage of time and charted the heavenly skies to make some sort of sense out of their environment. The first ancient Egyptian calendar dates back to 4236 BCE. The changing phases of the moon were extremely important to the ancient Egyptians. The earliest Egyptian calendar was based on the cycles of the moon, but it did not enable the Egyptians to predict the annual flooding of the Nile. Ah was also revered as a fertility god. The lunar calendar in Egypt was used by priests as a guide to improving the yield of agriculture crops on which much of ancient Egypt's wealth was based. This moon god was recognized and worshipped in Kemet and all the Levant before the so-called Israelite enslavement in Egypt and subsequent exodus. It was after the exodus that Moses discovered or rather created a new god and named him Yahweh of Israel. Most Jews, except of a few groups, believe that their Messiah hasn't yet come, but will one day. The Jewish sacred text is called the Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible. It includes the same books as the Old Testament in the Christian Bible, but they are placed in a slightly different order. The Torah, the first 5 books of the Tanakh, outlines laws for Jews to follow, also referred to as the Pentateuch. The rest of the OT is the Psalms and the Prophets. The origins of the Jewish faith are explained throughout the Torah. According to the text, Yahweh revealed himself to Moses. Moses then wrote the history of Jews from the creation of the first man, Adam, to the time of his death. Then others picked up from there. The Pentateuch includes the laws of Yahweh for Israel. The name of the founder Moses means in Kemetic languages son of or child of, as in Ramses, son of Ra. Moses, also called Moshe Rabbeinu in Hebrew, is the most important prophet in Judaism, and an important prophet in Christianity, Islam, the Baha'i faith, and several other Abrahamic religions. In the biblical narrative, he was the leader of the Israelites and lawgiver, to whom the authorship of the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, or acquisition of the Torah from heaven, is attributed. Moses, if he existed, likely lived in Egypt during the dynastic New Kingdom, and he was an early leader of the Hebrews and one of the most important figures in Judaism. He is a significant patriarch of all the Abrahamic religions, those who use the Torah, the Christian Old Testament, or the Quran as sacred texts. Moses is often associated with Ramses too, but there is nothing written about him in the historical record of ancient Egypt during the reign of Ramses II. He is supposed to be the author of the first 5 books of Moses named the Pentateuch.
Around 1000 BC, King David ruled the Jewish people. His son Solomon built the first holy temple in Jerusalem, which became the central place of worship for Jews. The kingdom fell apart around 931 BC, and the Jewish people split into 2 groups, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Sometime around 587 BC, the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first temple and sent many Jews into exile. A few Jews were allowed to return to rebuild the temple in 537 BC. Different books written by rabbis were codified into the Tanakh, Old Testament, as a holy book for worship. A second temple was built in about 516 BC but was eventually destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. The destruction of the second temple was significant because Jewish people no longer had a primary place to gather, so they shifted their focus to worshipping in local synagogues. While the Tanakh, which includes the Torah, is considered the sacred text of Judaism, many other important manuscripts were composed in later years. These offered insights into how the Tanakh should be interpreted and documented oral laws that were previously not written down. Around 200 AD, scholars compiled the Mishnah, a text that describes and explains the Jewish code of law that was previously orally communicated. Later, the Talmud, a collection of teachings and commentaries on Jewish law, was created. The Talmud contains the Mishnah and another text known as the Gemara, which examines the Mishnah. It includes the interpretations of thousands of rabbis and outlines the importance of 613 commandments of Jewish law. The first version of the Talmud was finalized around the 3rd century AD. The second form was completed during the 5th century AD. Judaism embraces several other written texts and commentaries. One example is the 13 Articles of Faith, which was written by a Jewish philosopher named Maimonides. Midrash is biblical exegesis by ancient Judaic authorities, using a mode of interpretation prominent in the Talmud. The word itself means textual interpretation, study. Vanessa Lovelace defines Midrash as a Jewish mode of interpretation that not only engages the words of the text, behind the text, and beyond the text, but also focuses on each letter, and the words left unsaid by each line. The term is also used of a rabbinic work that interprets scripture in that manner. Such works contain early interpretations and commentaries on the written Torah and oral Torah, spoken law and sermons, as well as non-legalistic rabbinic literature, Agadah, and occasionally Jewish religious laws, halakha, which usually form a running commentary on specific passages in the Hebrew scripture. Tanakh. Midrash, especially if capitalized, can refer to a specific compilation of these rabbinic writings composed between 400 and 1200 CE.
There are several sects in Judaism, which include Orthodox Judaism. Orthodox Jews are typically known for their strict observance of traditional Jewish law and rituals. For instance, most believe Shabbat shouldn't involve working, driving or handling money. Orthodox Judaism is a diverse sect that includes several subgroups, including Hasidic Jews. This form started in the 18th century in Eastern Europe and holds different values than traditional or ultra-Orthodox Judaism. Hasidic Jews emphasize a mystical experience with God that involves direct communion through prayer and worship. Shabbat is a well-known Orthodox Jewish Hasidic movement. Passover celebration. This holiday lasts 7 or 8 days and celebrates Jewish freedom from slavery in Egypt. Specifically, Passover refers to the biblical story of when the Hebrew God passed over houses of Jewish families and saved their children during a plague that was said to have killed all other firstborn babies in Egypt. This event supposedly led to the freeing of the Israelites from Egyptian bondage called Exodus. Historians challenge the existence of one man named Moses. There is no tangible evidence of his existence. Jewish history places him as being contemporary of the great Kemetic king Ramses II, the Great. This information is contained only in the book written by Moses or the author of the Book of Moses. The date is birth to Ramses II's reign. Ramses II has his name inscribed in hieroglyphs on the walls of temples in Kemet, present-day Egypt. There are monuments that attest to his existence. Moses' name is not found in any Egyptian writings, considering what is written in the Bible as being the brother of Ramses II. A composite Moses. Historians believe that it was impossible for one man to have accomplished everything attributed to him in the Bible, considering his age at the time of death at precisely 120. It is suggested that there were different heroes during the first 1,000 years of Israel's history, and the actual authors of the Pentateuch simply merged these heroes into a composite Moses. Considering the internal evidence of the Pentateuch, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, it has also been established that the writing styles of each book are different from the others. Also, there are stories in the Pentateuch that seem to be duplication of others with variations that contradict each other, suggesting that different people wrote the different versions.
The contradictions, duplications and variations suggest that various authors wrote different stories without collaborating. In some cases, there were attempts to correct previous stories that were not logical. Unfortunately, there is no evidence of Israelites having been enslaved in Kemet any time before or after the dynastic periods. The Exodus and crossing of the Red Sea are stories that have been crystallized in the minds of many by movies made in Hollywood. These events never took place. They are mythical stories promoted as a history of Jews to promote victimization of Jews by Egyptians, black people, just like Hollywood's Tarzan movies that dehumanize Africans. There is no evidence to support the reality of the stories. Israelites were never enslaved in Egypt. They were never slaves in Egypt. They were never to build the pyramids and were not liberated from there. The Exodus story is a hoax. No country existed called Egypt during the 11th, 12th, or 13th dynastic periods when Israelites were supposed to have lived there. The empire we call ancient Egypt was called Kemet. If the stories of the Israelites' enslavement were written before 500 BC, then the writers of those stories would have used the name Kemet instead of Egypt. The name Egypt came into existence after the Greek conquest of Kemet about 500 BC. The fictitious stories were composed and written after the collapse of the Kemetic Empire when the Greeks conquered Egypt.